Chapter 10. Boren. When I came to, I was lying on a mattress in a large, open room. The walls were made of heavy, rough-cut wood and were sparsely decorated. There was a fire going in the hearth on the far side of the room, and I could feel its dry heat from where I lay. Jars of food filled shelves that hung several feet below the ceiling. There was a big table in the middle of the room with 4 chairs around it. I estimated that it would have come up to my chest had I stood next to it. There were several windows covered with wooden shutters. I must have given some indication that I was awake, because I suddenly heard a voice. "You're awake, are you?" I sat up and looked around. There was a large man sitting on a box at the foot of the bed. His hair was silvery gray, and his beard was long, though well kept. His eyes seemed friendly enough, and his smile, though small, was still genuine. "Where am I?" I asked. "What happened?" "Well, both answers are simply given," the man responded. "You are in my house. And as to what happened, well, you met my son Bog on the road, though I'm not sure it was a meeting you would like to soon repeat." Bog. I remembered now. Was he the big thing that almost shook the life out of me? Yep, that was Bog. He can be a tad overcompensating at times. "And who are you? Though if I had to guess, I'd venture that you're one of Chartik's fabled twin sons." His statement surprised me. "I am. My name is Taran, but how do you know me?" "I know many things," he replied. "I have traveled much and listened much. A lot has been happening in Taris lately, and your father and I are friends." "Boren?" I guessed. "At your service," he replied. "But where's your father now? I should like very much to talk to him about the recent events that I've heard about." "He is dead," I said gravely. "He died trying to save me. He said I had to find you." Boren was quiet for a moment. His great gray head bowed now in sorrow. "I feared that might happen," he said softly. "Was it because of the transition to the cave?" "Yes," I replied, thinking of the sacrifice he had made. "It was too much for him." "So he really believes the prophecy then?" "Yes." "And the rumors I heard are true. Your brother has also arrived in Taris, and has overthrown your grandfather, the king?" "I don't know about the second part, but I do know that Jack arrived in Taris. He came through the portal with father and me. Could he have accomplished the second part already?" "That's what I have heard," Boren said. "He has some powerful magic about him." "He has some magic stones," I told him. 5 of them. Father said that I was to find you because you hid 3 other ones. He said you might tell me where they are." He looked at me for a long time. Finally he spoke. "He did he?" "He said you might not be willing to tell me." Again there was a long pause. Boren stood up and walked to the other side of the room. If he was old, he didn't show it. "And what happens when you find them?" he asked eventually. "What will you do with them?" "I don't know," I answered honestly. I don't even know what the stones really are." Boren let out a long sigh. "The stones make up the Dain Roshea," he replied, "an ancient wheel of magic formed at the inception of Taris and meant to protect it. It consisted of 8 stones arranged in pairs, the Foa, which meant protector, and the Thom, which meant lord. Each pair either guarded or controlled a certain aspect of Taris. 2 of them coincided with the mist, 2 with the race of giants, 2 with the passage of time, and 2 with the mystical portal between Taris and the threshold. At the inception of Taris, Dek was placed as guardian of the Dain Roshea, but Korath tried to steal it for himself. So Dek hid the wheel and charged a group of trusted giants to be their guardians. Your father and I were the latest guardians, along with a giant named Kree. Since the birth of you and your brother, we have been in heated debate as to what this meant for the Dain Roshea. Our greatest fear was that the prophecies might come true, and the stones would be repossessed by one who would use their power to release the giants back into the world of men." "This part I know," I said. "You decided to separate them and hide some of them in Taris, some in the threshold, and some on Earth." "Yes," he said. "But it seems that the plan failed." I told him about what happened to Kree, and about what Father feared Jack was going to do. "So what we most dreaded has come true," he finally conceded. "There are still the other 3 stones," I replied. "Father believed that I was the real fulfillment of the prophecy, and that if I got them I could somehow stop Jack from succeeding in his plans." Boren considered this. "I don't know," he said finally. There is so much that could go wrong. What if you do get your hands on the final 3 stones and then Jack gets his hands on you? If he had all 8 stones, nothing could stop him. Nothing is stopping him now, I contested. I have to at least try. I still don't know, he said. I need to consider this more. You're welcome to stay here in the meantime. He moved back towards me. I rewrapped your injury while you were unconscious, and you could use some more rest. Suddenly there was a ruckus at the door. Besides, he continued, you got off on the wrong foot with Bog. I'm sure he'd like to make things right with you. The door opened and in stepped one of the largest people I had ever seen. I immediately recognized him as my assailant on the road. He stood up to his full height once he had entered through the doorway. He was easily over 9 feet tall, and he was carrying something in his hands. Taran, meet Bog, Bourne announced. Bog, Taran. Bog dropped what he was carrying on the floor and shifted nervously on his feet. I told Dad that I left your things back where we met, and he sent me to fetch 'em. Sorry about what happened. He spoke slowly, as if each word was slightly difficult to conjure up. His gentle demeanor seemed so different from the creature I met on the road, and I could hardly imagine him being the same person. I was just about to tell him that it was all okay when another person burst through the door. Whoa, Boggy, where you been all day? Kirill, interrupted Bourne. We have company. The man named Kirill stopped and looked at me. He was much smaller than Bog, probably just a little taller than me. His bald head seemed a bit small for his body, and it shifted with quick, jerky movements like a squirrel's as he glanced back and forth between the other 3 of us in the house. Where'd he come from? Bog met him on the road, Bourne replied. Yeah, I bet he did, chuckled Kirill. Hey, company, did he bop you on the head with his fat fist or drag you here by your feet? He shook me until I passed out, I replied. His name's Taran, interjected Bourne. Nice to meet you, Taran, Kirill said. Bog has a great way with people. He looked over at Bog, who lowered his eyes sheepishly. I nodded back in reply. Kirill is my oldest son, Bourne explained. The 2 looked as different as night and day. Obviously, the look of confusion was evident on my face because Kirill gave a sharp laugh. We're adopted, obviously, he said. Can't you tell that I'm way better looking? Bog just smiled good-naturedly at Kirill. Their affection for and comfort with each other was apparent. It reminded me of the closeness Kamarak and I shared, and not for the last time I missed him and wondered how he was doing. Kirill spun a chair around and sat on it with his arms draped over the backrest. So, what brings you here, Taran? He asked. We don't have many visitors in our neck of the woods. I was sent here by my father, I replied. Bourne caught his sons up on what I had told them. Bog listened attentively to every word that Bourne said. Kirill was listening too, but he kept busy during the entire explanation. He was either taking off his boots, or drying his head with a towel, or rearranging the articles on the table. When Bourne had completed his explanation, Kirill blew his breath out loudly. That's some story, he said. Bog looked at Bourne. What are you going to do? He asked. I don't know, Bourne replied. If he is truly the fulfillment of the prophecy, then he's our only hope. But if he isn't, then we're just setting ourselves up for disaster. My father seemed convinced, I said. I know, responded Bourne, and that carries a lot of weight with me. But I still want to be sure. What about the other prophecies? Kirill wondered out loud. What other prophecies? I asked. Over the centuries, there have been other prophecies regarding the one spoken of in the original prophecy, Bourne replied. Like what? I pressed. I experienced a brief moment of relief. Maybe Jack and I weren't the ones that the prophecy spoke of. Maybe this was all some just mistake, and though there were some real issues still to deal with, at least the fate of the world wasn't at stake. Born of this world, yet born of another, and born of a third, neither one nor the other. Bog's slow recitation of this prophecy filled the room with an awesome solemnity, and seemed to demand a moment of silence. However, Kirill didn't appear to notice. That's the thing with prophecies, he broke in. They're about as clear as the mist that fills the valley. Born here, born there, and yet neither here nor there, but born somewhere else. Sounds like whoever made that one up was a bit somewhere else, too. Can you repeat that, Bog? I asked, ignoring Kirill. He did, and this time the look on my face kept Kirill's comments at bay. What are you thinking? Bourne asked. I'm thinking that Jack and I had one parent from here and one from Earth, but we were actually born in the threshold, I replied. Born of this world, yet born of another. And born of a third, neither one nor the other, Bourne finished thoughtfully. Still, there is a third prophecy. When discovery is wrought with pain, and blood falls like rain, he will come with Korath's bane. What is Korath's bane? I asked. No one knows for sure, Born replied. Some say that his bane was his hunger for power and his lust for the Dane Roshea. Others said that he had an illness that eventually destroyed his heart. Still others say that he was struck down by Dek with a mighty weapon, a sword or spear or dagger of some kind. This weapon was said to have been imbued with extraordinary power and could cut through anything. Korath wore armor that no weapon had been able to pierce, which made him virtually unstoppable in battle. But Dek was able to penetrate it with the weapon and kill him. While Born was explaining this, I slowly got up from the bed and limped over to my things. They were all still there, my pack, my lost shoe, the water canisters, and the sword. Unwrapping it from the shirt, I held it up before the three giants. A weapon like this? Again there was silence in the room. This time even Kirill was speechless. Born approached me and gently caressed the blade. "Where did you get this?" he asked as I handed it over to him. I told him of my accident in the stream and of the recovery of the blade. He held it in his hand with great reverence and care, testing its weight and studying the craftsmanship much as I had done. "There's writing on it, but I don't know what it means," I offered. He looked closely at the script on the guard, running his fingers along the etching. Then he studied the single letter on the pommel. Bog, Kirill, and I watched in hushed wonder as he repeated the process. Finally Born handed the sword back to me. "Well, that answers that." "What?" Kirill and I said together. "I'm ready to do whatever you need me to do," Born said to me. "What does the writing say, Da?" Bog asked. Born paused again, then fixing his eyes on me and pointing to the sword, he said, "The words on the guard say, 'When the one that was two becomes,' and I bet you can guess what the single letter on the pommel means." "One," I answered. "One," he confirmed. "This is Korath's bane, and you, my dear Terran, are the fulfillment of the prophecy. And now, not only your world, but Terrace and the Threshold as well, are in your hands."